Hey, so I'm just gonna pop out two videos real quick because I feel like it. And because I don't want to leave it on that note. I hate the political, legal world. It's unpleasant. Domination and adults in business. It's just, I don't know. Energy, my first love. Um, yeah. So pretty much my big golden ticket in the world of energy was probably when the molten salt reactor thing kind of hit YouTube. I was like all about that, researched it, posted on all sorts of websites. You know, I'm sure there were a lot of people like me of kind of comparable, you know, trade and concern as far as the global warming goes, who were really excited with the molten salt reactors and their potential to roll out extremely cheap, extremely safe nuclear energy. And since then, I've further educated myself on the nuclear topic, and I've also come across something that is potentially kind of a hybrid between fusion and fission, with the Sapphire experiment. And what I can tell is it's basically like a giant welder that is causing elemental reduction. Now, typically when we are engaging in the use of energy, we are breaking down a fuel. So the chemical fuel of oil gets broken into its constituent hydrocarbons, and those carbons are the source of my concern. So nuclear is very similar. They're breaking apart the atom, and the innards of the atom are spewing out and causing a chain reaction which perpetuates and generates heat in the process. So the breaking down of a fuel is so critical to any energy source. It's how the energy is stored in matter, right? So matter is energy stored, right? So anytime somebody is telling you that they're making energy and it's from nothing, it's a lie. Because there has to be something that is storing that energy that you're releasing. So there's a little bit of a red flag there, because when they are talking, they seem to be like, oh, it's hydrogen in and hydrogen out, and it's like, yeah. So to me, there has to be a missing ingredient to the videos that they put out. That is a fuel source. It could be something as simple as metal shavings, considering the fact the thing looks like a giant freaking MIG welder. You know, it's a glowing orb of electricity. That's a fusion ball that is supposedly like the answer to all the energy woes of the world, and simultaneously like not being talked about. So in some videos I've seen, it's like the DOD's involved, and you know, all sorts of you know, government contractors. That would be like an indicator that it might be a legitimate, you know, new type of nuclear reduction middle ground. Now there's comparable technologies out there, so it wouldn't be unheard of for there to be a subcritical or like a laser powered reactor that could produce energy, and also could safely break down nuclear fuel. And so it seemed, and I believe one of them is like Gemstar, and it's like an Indian company, and the guy seemed like he was really passionate, but it was honest about the limitations of the technology, which is pretty much the redundancy of manufacturing and maintenance involved in the laser side, plus the decreased output, but the increased safety of never having a self-perpetuated nuclear action. It's always dependent on the laser running. Ergo, all you have to do is shut the laser off, and you're no longer producing energy, making it intrinsically safe. So if it's a similar type of technology as Gemstar, then I say cool, except now it's like a welder instead of a laser, and the additional cost of manufacturing, an anode and a cathode and a giant transformer is probably significantly less than a, high frequency or high powered laser beam. I don't know that it is because I don't know anything about lasers, but I imagine it's probably significantly cheaper. But if it's a similar type of process, then I say cool, but it doesn't seem to be. It seems to be the complete opposite kind of. But not really. So I mean, it's a welder, and it's creating a fusion ball, but the introduction of a fuel, in my mind, is what they are leaving out of their videos that makes it a legitimate thing. And if it is a legitimate thing, I think it's a technology that is very comparable to the Gemstar technology, except without the additional cost of a large laser, and making that cost basically an anode, a cathode, and a transformer, which is cool. And it might be even cooler than molten salt reactors. But what's not maybe cooler and a little fishy because of the missing information is the high temperature helium reactors. And the reason that I think the high temperature helium reactors are so cool is you don't have the molten salt. It's so corrosive. And I almost think the engineering for higher temperatures, a higher temperature gas might be easier than salt because it's so corrosive. And then because it's even higher temperatures, it's even more efficient. And because it's even more efficient and even higher temperatures, you can just straight up refine methane with it, like right out the box. You can just take the carbon straight out of the methane. You got hydrogen, you got fuel, and you can separate your fuel and send out the safest, cleanest fuel in the world, and keep nuclear, tucked away in a corner somewhere, and not have to worry about the mass-produced global threat of nuclear waste. Which, I mean, if you pumped out enough modular reactors, I think having them cluttering the landscape could eventually become a hazard unto itself. But that would probably take hundreds of years of being 100% dependent on that tech. But I think that having a large one that can directly refine methane and avoid the salt loop is actually preferable over all the magic of the salt. Just kind of a layperson's perspective on it, but again, it brings me back to just I love. It's like a fantasy at this point, because if they were taking it seriously, we'd be like World War II. Let's build these factories. Let's rah rah rah. The troops, all the propaganda would be all about building, the energy future of a clean new world. But instead, we got some fishy propaganda. But anyway, I'm gonna keep up the dream because otherwise I'm gonna cry myself to sleep. But so anyway, if we could build these high temperature helium reactors, we could just be pumping out the carbon straight out of the methane at that temperature, sending out the hydrogen as her primary transportation fuel, and that process eventually downstream, you know, we could really use that carbon for fertilizer. So we could recycle that process into something that further sucks CO2 out of the air. So you take the carbon, you make a fertilizer out of it, and even just by mixing it into the soil directly, just and making it kind of more habitable for microorganisms in that way, just little air pockets. It doesn't take that much, just, you know, and then that more fertile soil can you know, grow more, even just wild plants. And that's a big part of it, is rewilding some earth. And just you know, honestly, it would be a choice. But I think that technology is peak. There's also some really cool battery technology out there. There's the aluminum air battery. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of those. There's a company out there called Eurobat, which is like a rechargeable aluminum air battery. So that's like next level. And honestly, those things are pretty cool. I think that I don't really understand the aluminum recycling process, but I do think that the fact that aluminum is a kind of electrical phenomenon unto itself and degrades and can be recycled is a battery option. You know, it's just one of those things where you would have to recycle them, but if it's a question of thermal energy and we're doing these nuclear reactors and thermal energy is abundant, then why not start rolling out the aluminum batteries and just recycling the aluminum as it degrades and making use of that thermal energy and doing it that way. It might be better than lithium, depending on the cost of the thermal energy, and I definitely think the aluminum will be cheaper than the lithium, if not now, by then, you know. There's, you know, pumped hydro, I think, is great. I'm not a big solar guy. I think that solar technology is kind of basically, I think economics, if its function exists at all, it serves as a metric of efficiency. And what I mean is that at net energy input to net energy output, the energy return on investment, how many watts did it take to build that thing versus how many watts will it ever produce or capture and turn into usable energy. And I'm a little bit suspicious that solar panels might be negative, only because if they were, and even at scale, I hate to say it, maybe it's because the mining, I think mining is an incredibly energy intensive process, and then the manufacturing, the distribution, the installation, and all these things, they have to be subsidized. And if they're being subsidized, then their energy cost is being kind of hidden. And if their energy cost is higher than their energy, their ability to capture energy, because they don't really generate, but whatever you want to call it, you know, their ability to make usable energy available, if that exceeds, that's information I would at least want to know. And I think that all the subsidies, for their good intentions, unfortunately mask that reality from me, and I'm kind of suspicious of it, seriously. So I'm not a big proponent of solar. I do think wind and you know, hydroelectric, obviously, are well above that threshold for being, requiring less energy to manufacture than they will ever generate. But I'm a little suspicious that solar might not meet that threshold. It's just a feeling, but it's one that drives my opinion. Oh, nuclear, I think, is 1,000-fold if you account for, and this is again where economics would be making sense if it was made by sensible, makers. Nuclear would probably be 10,000 times cheaper than fossil fuel if they were playing by the same rules. In other words, nuclear is responsible for managing 100% of its waste. And they should be, but the waste management of that plant is a huge expense that goes into the calculation of the people who invest in them. Whereas fossil fuel manufacturers or producers or exploiters or whatever you want to call it don't have that expense. Their waste is a public burden, and we all carry that cost, and that's reality. But the fact is that the cost to manage the waste of fossil fuel would make it so expensive that nuclear would be the only option. Which, now here's where it's, if you are a true capitalist and you believe that equal rules will yield unequal results, then nuclear becomes like the guiding hand of God telling you that this is the right choice. Because when you make, all right, everybody has to manage their waste, okay, nuclear is 1,000 times cheaper, okay, nuclear wins. And that's kind of laissez-faire. Well, not really laissez-faire, it's like rule fair. It's like, we're going to be authoritarian, but we're going to be equal, and we're going to make the rules equal, but we're going to have rules. And still, the most efficient is revealed amongst the equal rules, and that's going to yield an unequal result in the energy policy. But long term, if you were to follow that, what would you end up with? Cheap energy and clean air, clean water. I mean, and what does cheap energy get you? Cheap energy gets you a strong currency, because your currency is based on the availability of energy. And, then it just would have been a better investment, And it's not too late. We can do it. Yeah, not crazy. We can do it. Right?